Have you ever imagined Britain on the verge of civil war, and not over something like, Brexit, but over Ireland?
It does sound a little, well, unbelievable, doesn't it?
It does, but that was the reality in the lead up to World War One.
Yeah. The Edwardian period, people tend to, I think, romanticize it, as this golden age, peace and prosperity. But just under the surface, a lot of anxiety
Sure.
about Britain's place in the world, the empire. And then you have Ireland, all these tensions ready to, explode.
And that's what we are diving into today, this incredibly tense period, specifically Irish Home Rule, how it almost broke the United Kingdom. We've got firsthand accounts, speeches, analyses to see just how close Britain came to, well, imploding.
And it's key to remember, right? This wasn't just an Irish thing. This was a whole UK issue. It ignited passions everywhere. Liverpool, Parliament, it divided everyone.
So let's go back to Edwardian Britain. Imagine innovation everywhere, new technologies, electricity, cinema, changing life. But there's also this unease. The Boer War, it showed cracks in the empire. And Germany, a growing threat.
Right. And the Liberal Party win in 1906. Huge. Seemed like progress, reform. But their majority, it shrunk. So they needed the Irish Parliamentary Party to get things done. The price for that, Irish Home Rule, debated for decades. And now it seemed possible.
And this is where we meet Andrew Bonar Law,
Yeah.
leader of the Conservatives. He was really committed to the union with Ireland,
Yeah.
protecting the Protestants in Ulster. To
Right.
him, home rule, betrayal, a dangerous step towards the empire falling
Not
apart.
even clever. Bonar Law, he tapped into this, well, anti-Catholic feeling that was, all over Britain. People were scared of Irish immigration,
Yeah.
worried about loyalty to the crown, Rome rule. He used it all to turn people against home rule. Politics and prejudice, really.
And then even more tension, the Parliament Act, 1911. It changed everything. The House of Lords, they couldn't veto laws anymore. Home rule, it could actually happen.
Huge change, yeah. You have to remember, the Lords, they were, well, mostly aristocracy. They kept the Commons in check. The Act, the Conservatives saw it as like a power grab. Totally unfair. It made them furious.
Things get really interesting here. Because of all this, the Ulster Unionists, led by Sir Edward Carson, they become really important. Carson was a brilliant lawyer,
Yeah.
and he knew how to use drama, spectacle. He knew how powerful they were.
And what made him effective, he really understood the fears of the Ulster Protestants. Home rule, to them, a threat to their whole lives, who they were, their future. He turned that fear into a movement, one that challenged like the whole British state.
They weren't kidding around. The Ulster Covenant, 1912, it was political theater at its best. Hundreds of thousands signing their names, pledging to resist by all means necessary. It was defiance. It shocked British politics.
It was more than just symbolic, though, right? It was a statement. The Ulster Unionists, they were serious, ready to do anything, even fight, to keep Ulster British. It was a line in the sand.
And they weren't bluffing. The Ulster Volunteer Force, thousands of them, training, getting ready to fight their own government. This was something new in British history. It showed just how dangerous things were getting.
It was amazing, really, how fast they got organized. Leaders, discipline. And the key thing, weapons. This wasn't just a protest. This was a real army.
And then it was clear. They were serious. The Larne, gun running. 1913. In the dark, they smuggled thousands of guns, ammunition from Germany, right past the British. It showed how organized they were and how committed to defying the government.
Yeah, Larne was a turning point. The government, they looked weak. They couldn't control things. And the Unionists, more confident. War in the UK, unthinkable before. Now, it was a real possibility. Things had gotten that bad.
And then the Curragh incident. British officers near Dublin. They said they'd rather resign than enforce home rule in Ulster. It was a shock to the whole British establishment.
It showed, the army wasn't united. They were divided, just like everyone else. Home rule, it split them too. And the government, they were losing control. What if they ordered the army in? Would they even obey? Or would the army split apart? Scary to think about.
And to make things worse, Carson and his partner, F.E. Smith, they gave speeches all over Britain, huge rallies. They talked about the Ulster Protestants being attacked, in danger from a Catholic Dublin.
What's interesting is how it went beyond politics, right? It was about religion, national identity, loyalty. People had to choose sides.
Yeah.
And the consequences, they could be terrible.
The Ulster Unionists, obviously, against home rule, but the whole situation, it was making Irish nationalists stronger too. The Irish Volunteers, they formed because of the UVF. They got weapons, prepared to fight.
Right. And then, in Dublin, 1914, British troops killed Irish citizens. After a fight over the volunteers getting guns, it just made things worse. It seemed like two sets of rules. The Unionists, they defied the government. But the Nationalists, they were punished.
Summer 1914. Crisis everywhere. Britain felt like it was about to fall apart. Civil war was close. The historian Michael Laughlin, he called it the biggest crisis since the 1600s. The whole country divided. The threat of violence everywhere.
Yeah, really volatile. Both sides, armed, ready to fight. It felt like something terrible was going to happen.
So everything's falling apart. Did the government just sit there and watch?
Not quite. King George V, he knew it was bad. So he decided to, step in. July 1914, weeks before World War I, he calls everyone to Buckingham Palace to try and find a solution.
Wow. A royal intervention, like something out of, a movie. What was he hoping for? Did it even have a chance?
He wanted to stop a civil war, bring everyone together, Irish nationalists, Ulster Unionists, find some common ground. But it was, well, a long shot. Both sides, they were dug in, their demands totally different.
So what happened? Did they make any progress?
No, they didn't. The king tried. But it ended in a stalemate. The Nationalists, led by John Redmond, they wouldn't budge. A united Ireland, home rule, any compromise. It was like betrayal to them and to the Irish people.
And the Unionists, did they move at all on home rule? Nope, not at all. They were determined to resist any home rule that put them under Dublin, a Catholic Dublin. They wouldn't accept it. The conference showed, how far apart they were. The Irish question, it just seemed impossible to solve.
So civil war is still on the table and all this. Well, Europe's about to explode. It's hard to imagine Britain dealing with this and a world war at the same time.
It is. And then, right when the crisis is at its worst, something happens.
Yeah.
Changes everything. June 28th, 1914, Franz Ferdinand, the Archduke, assassinated in Sarajevo. And that started the First World War.
It's like history intervened. Did the war just push home rule aside, or did it change things completely?
Both, really. Suddenly, the government had different priorities. War in Ireland, terrible, but a European war, much worse. Home rule, put on hold. The crisis was paused, but the problems, they were still there.
So just a break, not a solution. Did it fix anything in Ireland? No, it didn't. It just delayed things, the issues, they were still there. And the war, it made Irish nationalism stronger. A lot of Irish people felt betrayed, that Britain cared more about the war than their freedom.
So the home rule crisis, it kept going. It's amazing how these events, they all connect. And they changed, Ireland and Britain forever.
The war, it was a catalyst for Ireland leaving the UK. The tensions, the anger, it all got worse. And the fight for independence, more violent.
In a way, it seems like the Unionists, they got what they wanted by being so determined, by being willing to fight. They stayed out of home rule. Did they win? Maybe, maybe not.
Wow.
But they definitely changed history.
Yeah. And it makes you think, right, about force and politics. Was it dangerous what the Unionists did? Did it show that, violence works, even against a strong government? It's something to think about, even today. The home rule crisis, it still matters.
It's just wild to think the UK at its most powerful. And it's brought down by this fight over Ireland. It makes you wonder, why do we hear more about this? It almost destroyed the country.
Yeah.
All these plots and tensions, almost a war. There's like a forgotten part of history.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, World War I, it was so huge, right? It kind of overshadows everything else. But I think there's another reason.
Oh, what do you mean?
I think it's because, this whole period, it doesn't fit the story we tell about Britain. Edwardian Britain. It's supposed to be stable, peaceful, progress, polite politics. But then you have this, armed groups fighting, the army almost rebelling. It doesn't really match up.
That's true. We think of British politics as, civilized debate, compromise, using force, it seems almost un-British.
Exactly. And I think people don't like to admit how close it came to falling apart. It's a darker part of our history where violence, extremism, it mattered.
It is a bit unsettling to think about, but doesn't that make it even more important to learn about it, to face those uncomfortable truths?
Absolutely. By looking at this forgotten part, we understand, Britain and Ireland better. We see how strong beliefs, politics, violence, it can push any society to the edge.
It shows how fragile things are. National unity. I mean, the UK, a superpower, right? And it could have been shattered by its own problems. It's a reminder that no country, no matter how strong, is safe from that.
And it makes you wonder, right, what if World War I hadn't happened? What then? Would there have been a civil war? How would it have changed everything? Britain, Ireland?
A big what if.
Yeah.
It shows how unpredictable history is.
Hmm.
How our passions, beliefs, politics, they all mix together. And sometimes the results, they're surprising and not always good.
Yeah. History isn't, just a straight line. It's messy, full of choices, accidents, and you never know where it'll lead.
So there we have it. A look at this forgotten time. British history. Plots, tensions, violence. It could have changed everything. It makes us think differently about the past and maybe understand the world today a bit better.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Hope you found it, well, interesting. Something to think about.
And until next time, keep asking those questions. Keep exploring. Keep learning.